Hey, hello, welcome everybody. We've got a great show tonight. As you know, welcome to Think, Engage, Thrive, where we always talk about great entrepreneurial stories and we always try and bring you the best, most innovative entrepreneurs to tell their stories. And we talk about the good, the bad, and the funny. Tonight, we've got a great one for you, a totally new category of business, which is always fun and exciting. I think sometimes we get stuck in products or we get stuck in traditional businesses and just new startups, which is fine. We can learn from all of that. But now we've got Matt Williamson, who's an entrepreneur many times over. He's based in Durham, North Carolina. He's known for co-founding two successful companies. He's co-founder of Windsor Circle, which was a marketing automation software company, and that got acquired by a larger company, OSG, WhatCounts, back in 2018. After that, he started this new product, Plum CoOwnership, which is a property technology platform that allows people to form groups to buy and own a property together. So it's very interesting to me. I don't know a lot about it. We're all going to learn together tonight, but I think it's really a cool business. And as we start talking about it, I think you'll find that too. And he's a double Tarheel, good sports fan, just like the rest of us, with an undergraduate degree in philosophy, political science. He was a member of the Golden Fleece, Carolina's highest honorary society. So, he's intelligent, got a big brain, probably bigger than mine. He later graduated with honors from the full-time MBA program at UNC, where he was the class president. He's a scuba diver, volunteer with Habitat for Humanity. So he's like the Energizer Bunny. He's always going. He enjoys cheffing it up with his friends and family with bright colors and bold flavors. So he's constantly doing things. So we're going to bring him in and talk to him about it and see what this is all about. Matt, thanks for being here, and we're all happy you're here.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Great background, really interesting stuff that you've done. And as we were talking before the show about, your new business, your old businesses, things like that. So give people sort of a background in your entrepreneurial journey, where you started, how you started, and why essentially you started.
Yeah. Well, so I always like to say that the very first entrepreneurial endeavor I ever engaged in was in fourth grade. There was this kid named Danny who was always cutting up, and Mr. Kingery would always assign him ABCs. He'd have to write 100 of them. And I realized one day, it's like, well, I can write 100 ABCs sitting around watching TV. So I started writing the ABCs and I started selling them to Danny for a nickel or whatever. And then pretty soon, like the cut-ups all figured out that I would like write these things. I would just come home and write ABCs while I was watching TV, and I had them in my book bag. I would just sell them out for 25 or 50 cents. So this notion of like finding a need in the marketplace, seeing if you can do it 10 times better, and enjoying the value of that, like that started very early for me. And then kind of throughout, like most kids, I started a little lawn service when I was in high school. Mine actually turned into a real enterprise. I was paying taxes. I had a riding mower. I employed other students, the whole bit. And so it kind of turned into a thing. But then the next time that I really got a taste for entrepreneurship was that I graduated from UNC with a philosophy and political science degree, realized that nobody would let me sit under a tree and think. And, so I don't regret my my liberal arts degree, but you end up going into sales or marketing or something like that's what people kind of generally do. And I landed when I was coming through that experience, I had an opportunity for kind of sales at a pharmaceutical company, which would have been kind of like, big and clunky and corporate. Or there was this technology startup in Washington, D.C. And I went up to go do my interview, and a dog came bounding through the office. Ridiculously handsome guy in his rugged jeans, like comes out with the dog, and it turns out he's the founder. And this company was basically a whole bunch of like pro and semi-pro rugby players that needed a way to like kind of like support their habit. And they built a little piece of software that ended up being used by like 75% of the government agencies. And man, did I learn a lot in that job about hard work and drive and using your brains to kind of like corner a part of the market. And also a bit of irreverence, right? I mean, we had this like fun, kooky culture, and there was one point where, because we were selling to federal government, it was computer networking stuff. A bunch of the folks that we sold to all were like Harley Davidson owners and motorcycle riders.
Wow.
And I had done a 10,000-mile motorcycle journey by myself right after I graduated from college on a 600 motorcycle. Yeah, it was crazy. And I don't know. I was lamenting not having that freedom. And then it dawned on me. I was like, wait a minute. Like every time I talk to these guys, I bring up the motorcycle trip because it's a great way to connect. And I went into my boss and I said, hey, what if you guys buy me a motorcycle and I'll drive around the country and I'll show the new product and via laptop. And this was back in the days when digital camera was a brand new thing and websites were kind of new. This is back in the area, back in the the era of the first web browsers and this kind of thing. And so they were like, that's insane. And then the owner of the company gets wind of it and he slaps the table and he goes, that's the best thinking I've heard in 5 years. Fund it. And all of a sudden I like walked out and my buddy's looking at me. He's like, did they just agree to buy you a motorcycle and give you 3 weeks off? And so anyway, like this notion of kind of this really like fast moving, irreverent, creative, not being bound in by the hierarchy like that. I think entrepreneurs are kind of cut out of that cloth, or at least some of them are. And I definitely am. The next job I got into, I met, you're gonna get a kick out of this. I met a Calvin Klein jeans model while scuba diving in Honduras.
Oh, gee.
And she recruited me into this next software company. And so I was there. Some of the smartest people, it's called eDocs, and there's an eDocs mafia up in Boston. A whole bunch of those guys did fantastic, mostly in the electronic billing and payment space. And then the next thing you know, I went back to business school. My wife and I went for a year. We just quit everything and moved to Latin America for a year. And we volunteered for Habitat for Humanity. That was a big, important year in a young relationship. And then came back to business school and learned finance and accounting and leadership and all the cool stuff. And I came out of there and landed at Bronto, and then started Windsor Circle, and then started Plum. So
wow.
Once I kind of figured out the joy and the excitement of being able to shape something like wet clay into something, and then see if you can do it, that fits who I am, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So you were at Bronto, and then Windsor was sort of a better execution of Bronto, right? Bronto.
Well, I mean, like Bronto gets its due. Bronto, organically funded, never took a single dime, sold for $160 million to NetSuite, and so created generational wealth for the two founders, and they shared it. They did a good job of sharing it throughout the stack. I think for me personally, I was there from kind of year 2 to year 7. And there was this big itch that I had to kind of be a founder, and they already had 2 founders, right? I wanted to be CEO. They already had a good CEO.
Yeah.
And there just kind of wasn't room for a third musketeer. And we ended on great terms, and we're still friends. But I decided to start playing with a couple of ideas. The first idea I tested, I called BuzzBox. And I loved the idea. The venture capitalists hated it. And the idea of BuzzBox, you got to go back. This was like 2007, 2008. So this is right when the iPhone, and the iPhone, the smartphone seemed like the pinnacle of a luxury device.
Sure.
But social media was also taking off at this time. The payphone was dead, right? Payphones were dropping out at this point. And it dawned on me, it's like, wait a minute, there's all of this infrastructure out there. What if we put basically iPads everywhere a payphone was, and people could come in and they could use it. They could do, Facebook, they could do Twitter, they could do all these things that were kind of brand new back in the day. And the cost of using it would be to answer a few survey questions, because all those points of presence are meticulously mapped out in terms of consumer preferences and demographics and that kind of thing. So if someone was watching it at the Durham Bulls, you had a good sense of, like, if I popped them some questions about the new flavor of Coke, you would get specific answers, right? And so,
sure.
So the idea, marketers loved it, but the venture capitalists didn't like it. Not because of the rollout, not because of that, but because every time some drunk put his fist through the pad, it would cause a truck roll, and those truck rolls would be very expensive. So we folded that one. And Brad McGinnity, that you met during the Windsor Circle run, he and I were trying to get that thing going. And 5 minutes later, I texted him and I said, "Hey, let's hop back on. I got the next idea." And that was what turned into Windsor Circle. So you had to kind of fail first, right? With the Windsor Circle idea, he was like, "I love this idea. And why didn't we start with this one?"
That's always the way.
Because I'm an idiot. Yeah, that's why. And then we kind of started playing company. We even met 2 technical co-founders. And so the 4 of us were kind of doing it. There was a couple other people hanging around, and we were making progress, but just not fast enough. And I went to a conference, and a friend who had started a company called me a very unsavory term and just basically said, "You're being a, you know what, like you just need to jump. Like you need to go do this and find out if you can get it done." And I sleep really hard at night. I always run really hard and I go to bed and I sleep really hard. And that night I'm just sitting there staring at the ceiling. And my wife, Laurie, was like, why are you awake? You never have a hard time sleeping. And I was just like, well, Adam called me a this and that. And, basically said that I didn't have the courage to go do it and that I need to just jump. And so she agreed to go back to work, like us laying there in bed at whatever, 3 a.m. and support me in trying to get this thing going. And she's a social worker, so she's not my sugar mama. She's like my sepia mama or something. But she kept the mortgage going, kept us in insurance, and I committed to a year with no salary. And so here's a fun story about that was that the 3 other co-founders were kind of hemming and hawing about whether or not to jump in. And I finally said, "Well, guys, like I'm going for it. Like I've made the decision. I'm gonna quit Bronto. I'm gonna go do this." And I created a simple cap chart in Google Sheets, and I shared it. And it had an options pool, for 10%. And then I said, and you get 1%, you get 1%, you get 1%, and I've got the other 87%. And they were like, "Oh my God, yeah, you can't expect us to leave our company, for a safe paying job for 1%. I was like, "I'm not asking you to do that. All I'm saying is I'm the only one that said it. Like I'm the only one that's actually turned in my resignation. So if you want more, then I got your hearts. I need your wallets. I need you to get in the game."
Sure.
And so one by one, like we just did it openly and transparently. One by one, we went back and forth and negotiated and, well, what if I put some money in? And what if I do this? And what if I do that? And one by one, we ended up getting to numbers that everybody felt comfortable with and a little bit of money in a bank account. And boom, we had 4 guys committed to a year with no salary. And we're going to go see if we can make it happen. And so,
yeah, I think that's an important discussion point. We've talked about a lot of things on these past shows, but when it comes to startups, and I've been in that position a number of times where I've committed and not taken a salary for a period of time. Either I saved up because I knew I was going to do it, or like you, I was able to rely on my wife, or in my earlier youth, I just struggled. But I've talked about this on my show. The first startup I ever did, it was a total disaster. I mean, lack of leadership, lack of understanding of process. It was before I got my MBA. I did that. And after it was a disaster for me, I would have made more money working at McDonald's for 4 years. But I sold the business and I went to graduate school. And like you, I felt leadership, process, not so much about and finance, as well as some marketing tools. But I really lacked, I think my first startup, I really lacked leadership and process skills. But that for 4 years, I struggled. I had to move back in with my family because I couldn't, so I've been in that position. And I think that there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there today that get a skewed idea from watching some of these startups get funded with 100 million or 200 million, or they do an A round right away. They think they're going to make,
it's all Lamborghinis and champagne. And it's just,
and it's not,
Not that way.
Not that way.
Well, so we call those years of the Windsor Circle years. We call those the years of boxed wine and rice and beans. And I have a couple of thoughts about that moment. Like one of them was the absolute freedom that I felt. Like I can distinctly remember driving to work that first day. I had zero salary. I had no product. I had no customers. And I literally like shouted at the top of my lungs, like freedom. Like I was like, wow, like I get to go create this thing and sink or swim. I've been saving, money. I've got a year runway. It's going to be tight, but I got a year, and I can go do this thing and do it
Yeah.
that I choose. And very, very magical moment. The other thing that I tend to share with entrepreneurs about those early formative days is that like you're most likely not starting something straight out of college. Like you're probably somebody that's been working for a while,
Right.
maybe a few years or maybe a lot of years, and you already know what you can make. You know what you're worth in the marketplace, and doing a startup, I guarantee you, will run you harder, work you harder, expose you to more failure, expose you to more things to learn. Like you may be ragged at the end of it, but you will be way smarter and way more experienced and have way more perspective. And it's the kind of perspective that the C-suite really appreciates. Like they understand what it's like to take those big risks. They understand what it's like to make decisions with imperfect data. And so when you get into those kinds of situations as a entrepreneur, yeah, it's hard. And if you don't make it, which statistically you won't, you'll pop out on the other end of that more marketable.
Yeah.
And you can always make the money back, right? And then the second thing that I tend to say is that when you're working your way through that experience, the reality is you're not going to end up homeless.
Right.
Everybody kind of gets this, oh, we're going to go bankrupt. It's going to be awful. And like, not really, right? And so this is a cheesy thing, but there's a book that Dale Carnegie wrote called How to Stop Worrying and How to Start Living.
Yeah.
And it has this little breakdown for like anxiety, like how to do this. And it's basically like, ask yourself what the worst thing, this thing you're worried about, what's the worst thing that can happen? And you go like, well, I might fail at this startup. And you go like, is that really the worst thing? Because then you just go get a job. Okay, well, all right, that's not the worst thing. What's worse than that? Well, I fail at this and we don't have a lot of money for a while. Like, is that really the worst thing? I mean, like you volunteered for a year with Habitat. That seemed to turn out pretty good. Okay, well, that's not the worst thing. And you just gotta like work your way down through the stack. And what I got to at the end of it was I've got a lot of family and friend who love us. And if we had to move in with somebody, we could. So I wouldn't end up homeless. And even if that was the case, I was a pretty good Boy Scout and I could probably, sustain us in a tent for a little while, not afraid of hard work. So I'll go pick up a broom. Like, and then like what happens is you get to the absurd and you just kind of like, yeah, that's not really going to happen. I don't need to be worried about this. And so, was it tough? Yeah. Did we, did the vacations for the family end up being like, go visit Uncle Joey in the mountains? Like, yeah, for a year, we didn't get to go on cruises or whatever. Like, okay. But at the end of the day, we were doing something we were really passionate about with people that we really loved. And it was fun. It was hard, but it was fun.
Yeah.
So,
I think for most people, it's the fear of failure. People don't like to fail and they don't like to think about failure. And failure is part of learning. But I've never been involved in a startup that didn't have sort of a bleak moment where you start questioning. It could be 6 months down the road. It could be 8 months down the road. It could be a Friday night and you've got to make payroll on Monday and you don't have enough money in the bank to cover it.
Yeah.
And you're scraping together your credit cards. But if you believe in what you're doing, you'll get that, you'll get through it. But you're right. What's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen, you're not going to die,
right.
but it's failure. People are afraid of failure.
I'll go one step further. I have a perspective on that. It's failure. Like people, a lot of people aren't wired to think that failure is okay. One of the things that really hamstrings people is the idea of wasting time or effort. They really get hung up on that. Like, well, what if I work really hard for 6 months or a year or God forbid 4 years and it all goes down the tubes? Like, well, I mean, like, okay. I mean, that's the nature of trying something, right? Okay, it might. Statistically, it will go down the tubes, right? I mean, like, get used to it. Um, but a lot of people really get hung up on starting something that they don't know will have a meaningful and positive outcome.
Yeah.
And so I wholly reject that. Like the people that have made the most changes in our economy, in our lifestyles, in the way that we kind of approach the world, they took big, goofy, crazy risks. And that, and I often think about that whole Thomas Edison quote. It's a little cliche, but that whole thing about I didn't fail at creating a light bulb. I successfully discovered 99 ways not to make one. Right. Which is very valuable. I mean,
you're 100% right.
Right. You got, and you can sit in a box and try to think your way out of it. But the reality is you just got to like waste some time and waste some effort and get it out there where people can touch it and play with it. And if you don't have it right, you'll know right away. And if you do have it right, you'll start to get some signals, and those signals will lead you to the smart, creative iteration that I think most people are endowed with, but that entrepreneurs are kind of uniquely suited to pull that thread and keep going.
Yeah. I agree with you. So now you've sold Windsor. Now you're on to Plum CoOwnership.
Yeah. So we sold after kind of 7 or 8 years in the game. We were acquired at Windsor Circle. It was a good base hit, wasn't a home run, and that allowed us to renovate our 100-year-old house. It's right off of Duke's East campus, and that turned out beautifully. It was amazing. I was able to take a sabbatical. I went and got my rescue diver certification by hand. I built a bar in my backyard called Uncle Steve's Salon. I don't know anything about tractors or bocce ball, and I rented a tractor and I put it in a bocce ball court. That was fun. But in that process, that creative engine started moving. So I did like put the laptop away and just breathe for a while. I mean, entrepreneurship is hard. It takes a lot out of you.
You're about the 12th person who has said on this show, plus a bunch of my friends on LinkedIn, that all said the same thing. As soon as I sold, I was able to put the laptop away. I sort of tuned out for a little while and just I re-energized myself and got my bearings straight.
It's kind of like getting hungry again, right?
Yeah.
And it worked. It was wonderful. Like I just spent a lot of time just kind of my wife said, like, you are the worst sabbatical taker I know. Like, I was constantly in motion. I just wasn't in motion on my laptop, right? And I picked up tennis. I'm 50, and I pick up tennis and get my ass beat every single day because like, who picks up tennis when they're 50? But I'm having a ton of fun with it, right? And so I was out there a lot, and I was doing all the construction stuff. That was really fun, very gratifying. I built a Belgian cobblestone walkway with this like Fibonacci sequence, like spiral in it. And yeah, I mean, it was just like super hard work, but a lot of fun and just kind of gratifying to be outside breathing fresh air every day. But, I made a decision that in this year-long sabbatical I was taking, that I would go 6 months with no laptop. And then on July 4th, kind of a little bit of like Independence Day, I would shave. I grew this like big shaggy beard. I shaved it all off. I put my business clothes back on. And on July the 6th, I think that happened to be that Monday, I came into the American Underground, which is the startup hub that I work in Durham, and started working on the next ideas. So I had 3 or 4 of them. And I was kind of pulling threads on all of them to kind of do research and which one do I think is going to be the one. And the co-ownership idea really started to stand out. And it stood out for 2 reasons. One of them was I started making phone calls to people and who had already co-owned vacation houses. And I start to see the patterns laying out. When it went well, people did a really good job of knowing what to ask each other. They got good conversations. They made decisions. And then critically, they wrote the decisions down, usually in the form of an operating agreement. And if you did those things, those groups over-indexed for happiness. The ones that were like buds and they wanted to like, their concert friends or something, and they decided to like just rush out, buy a beach house, and they'll figure everything else out later. Those ones kind of over-indexed for things going south, and they would really struggle. And it was mostly because it just missed expectations. It wasn't anything monumental, but the most egregious one that we found in the research was there was two guys that bought a house together, longtime friends. They bought a house together at the beach. They got on a mortgage together. And only afterwards, one of them says, do you think we should list this on Airbnb or should we do like a traditional property management company? And the other one's like, what are you talking about? We're not renting this thing out at all. I don't want anybody doing anything funky on my couch. And then the first guy's like, well, I can't afford the mortgage payments if we don't rent this thing out. And like, what a terrible time to find out this like critical piece of information.
Yeah.
And so the genesis of this thing was like, okay, we are not actually a real estate firm. Like what we do that's really unique secret sauce is kind of like eHarmony and premarital counseling for the purpose of going and buying a vacation house together. Like what we're really doing is getting people aligned, using technology to make that go really fast, building the operating agreement, sticking them into an LLC, and then boom, off they go buy a house. And so that realization that there was a pattern there and I could build defensible technology around the pattern, that's what got me really excited. The other thing that got me really excited about the idea over the other ones was that in doing the research, I discovered there's actually 1.5 million co-owned vacation houses right now. Like,
wow.
Take Plum out of the picture. Yeah. Like I thought I'd be doing a lot of evangelizing. And what's actually the case is that this happens something like 75,000 times a year. And so it was like, oh, like, okay. I mean, like the idea that everybody just naturally does it isn't quite the case, but it's also not the case that it's like, I got to go pitch this brand new idea to people. Like people know co-ownership. Like everybody knows somebody that's done it. And we just need to be 10 times better than the DIY that lives out there today. And so then I started like looking at substitutes. Okay, well, what are other things that people do? Well, it turns out timeshare's got a bit of a rep, right? I mean, it's not the most popular thing. It was a $9 billion business in 2022. Phil, it is a $10 billion business this year in 2023. Like timeshares are growing.
Yeah.
Short-term rentals, $39 billion a year in North America. It's massive. And when I think about those two businesses, that's $50 billion a year that's being spent. And if you go grab another statistic, there's surveys out there that demonstrate that more than half of Americans, when polled, say that they want to own a vacation property.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, it's like, okay, half of America wants to do this. They're spending $50 billion because they can't. That sounds like there's an overlap here.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so would it be helpful to just kind of like, once I got the chrysalis of the idea, kind of like name the tactical steps that happened from there?
Yeah. I mean, I think you've done, I was just writing this down because I think one of the things that you've done really well and is beneficial to entrepreneurs is you just walk through your whole process of thinking of how you got there, how you broke down the market, which most people that come on, they talk about their startup. Yeah. But you just went into the process of how you do it. So yeah, sure. Keep going, because I think that was a great, I think it's a great way to look at it and people can learn from that. I'm just fascinated by, what you just said, because now, as you say it, I've never, and I said this to you before, I've never thought about co-ownership. Yeah. I've thought about buying a second property. My wife and I have talked about it. And we, but I've never thought about co-ownership, but the way you talk about it, it makes sense to me.
Yeah. It's more obvious once you kind of consider like,
yeah,
oh, I didn't realize it existed that much. I didn't realize people were doing this. I didn't realize that there was a way to make it easy and to protect my interests as I engage with the group. And so, we often say, 15 years ago, the idea of getting in some stranger's car is like absolute insanity, right? The idea that you would sleep in someone else's house and pay them to do it seemed like dangerous and insane. And now we don't think anything of getting an Uber to go to the Airbnb. Like that's actually the preferred mode of travel for a lot of people these days.
Yeah.
And so, kind of think of like, when I think about it through that lens, we are standing in a world where everybody is already used to the sharing economy. They're already used to the idea that technology can be used to create trust between individuals to go do a thing. And so why wouldn't they be predisposed at this day and age to a more modern way of buying vacation houses? Why wouldn't they be predisposed to, hey, I can use technology and process to form up an ownership group, know that I can trust them, know that they can trust me, and know that the technology will build the protections in to make us all safe? Like, of course, I mean, that makes a ton of sense, right?
Yeah.
And so then if we believe that, then it's just down to execution. Like, okay, well, show me that it's actually 10 times better. Like, show me that you're really going to keep me safe. And what's been happening for us is we've gotten ourselves to a place now where when we kind of walk people through all the things we do, our sales signal that they're picking up what we're laying down is the words, wow, you guys have thought of everything.
Yeah.
The minute you hear that, you're like, they're in, like they believe. And we convert a very high percentage of the people that say those words. And so we know to, kind of keep putting different messaging and different things around them until they get to that realization of like, wow, you thought of everything. And as
Yeah.
soon as you get that, boom, off you go. So,
Yeah.
so what happened for us is we were doing kind of early market research. So I hadn't incorporated the company yet. And so then I got to a place where I was like, okay, I'm going to jump. I'm going to do this. And I'm going to give it a certain amount of time. I think that's important for entrepreneurs to hear,
Yeah.
is that one of the ways to make the craziness of starting a company more digestible is give yourself milestones. And so I'd already been in 6 months of research at no salary. And I was like, I'm going to go after this thing. I'm going to do another 6 months. And in those 6 months, I am going to raise a pre-seed round. And so I'm going to raise like angel money, so to speak. I'm going to get the process nailed down. I'm going to start working to find somebody, some group, and take them through the process. And so we ended up raising in aggregate about $1.4 million. That was made a little easier by the fact that I was a serial entrepreneur. So I did right by my board and my investors in the last business. So when they got hold of the fact that I was going to go do this, Scott Wingo of the Tweener Fund, he was adamant. He's like, I want to be first money in. And so boom, the Tweener Fund was in. And then Andrew Cleland, who's a manager of Comcast Ventures, and they were our lead back at Windsor Circle. Not only did he write a personal check, but he also brought to the table Studio Ventures, and Studio is up in New York, and they financially are our lead investor. So they're an institutional fund that takes early bets on entrepreneurs with a great idea, and watch them kind of build out both the product and the marketing engine, that kind of thing. And so we incorporated as a Delaware C Corp. And I think that's important for entrepreneurs to hear, because the way that a lot of people do it is like, oh, I'll just go incorporate it as an LLC. And that certainly is the easiest first thing. In fact, there's online tools now. You just like hit a button and be an LLC in a day.
Yeah.
But the Delaware C Corp is kind of specifically set up in a way that is kind of investor ready.
Sure.
And I didn't know that when I was doing Windsor Circle, and my startup attorney kind of said like, well, you got a choice here, and it's just a few $100s more. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, we intend to raise venture capital, so let's go ahead and do it right. And sure enough, like as I was talking with investors, it's almost like a signal. Like it's like, hey, I know what I'm doing. Like, we're already investor ready. Yeah. Oh, well, do you have an options pool? Yeah, we carved out 20% for the employees. Oh, okay. And what's happening is like tactically, like you got to go do these things. The fact that you've done them before, and gotten ready for it, like that's a huge signal that they're dealing with somebody who's like thinking about it correctly. So that made it easy for us to raise. And so we raised money, and that kicked us into gear. So we've been building the platform around the process. And that's been just a lot of trial and error. It's like just jumping forward. You'll often hear the phrase that an entrepreneur is somebody that jumps off the cliff and builds the airplane on the way down. And so, right, like that, I mean, that's very true. I mean, like at every step, like we're leaning into the risk and leaning into the unknown. and trusting that we're just smart enough and hardworking enough that we'll pull it together. Now that said, one of our core values back at Windsor Circle, which you experienced as a customer and which we brought forward to Plum, is openness and transparency. And so we really press hard when people are engaging us and say like, hey, I need you to hear that we're a startup. Like, you know, we'll work extra hard. Here's all the reasons why you can trust us. But you know, we're not going to try to fleece you or snow you here. Like, you're going through for the first time. And so, you know, like, be ready for that. And that will shake some people out, but that's okay. Because ultimately you need them to get through the entire process. And then you need those early customers to be your references for the next venture investment. And if someone feels like they've been handled poorly, that'll show up. And so we really make sure we're crisp on that. And then we earn our stripes by just going the extra mile. And what's happened then is that, you know, bit by bit, our technology platform came together. Every time you encounter a hardship, you learn how to solve it. You build a little bit of process around it. At Windsor Circle and at Plum, we have this phrase: it's suck less every day. Every day, like you suck right now. Every day, find something and suck less at it. And you know, and like a lot of times you just feel the suck. I mean, there's a lot of things you're like, God, I wish that was better. I wish that was better. And then you stand back one day and you're like, holy crap, like our product looks really good.
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, today I had 4 different people say, wow, you've thought of everything. Like, I mean, like, you sometimes as an entrepreneur, you're running so hard, you don't realize all the progress you're making. And then you stand up and you go, oh, like we've built a thing, and this thing is valuable.
Yeah. No, I think that it's that it's great. The one question that I have is, do the people go out and find a property on their own, or is part of your interface having listings of properties, or is that something you're thinking about for the future? And right now you're just focused on the process of facilitating the co-ownership.
Such a great question. So we are definitively on the side of facilitating the co-ownership. So again, I would just kind of keep saying we're eHarmony and premarital counseling. Like, our job is to find people and get them together, get them comfortable, and then enter them. Now that said, the platform kind of works in both directions. So if you were to go out to our site right now, so go to plumcoownership.com, go check it out. And if you go to our marketplace, the marketplace has a couple different things in it. One of the things is groups seeking co-owners. And so let's say Phil and I decide, hey, let's go, you know, buy a mountain house together. And well, it's not any mountain. Like, we're going to end up kind of saying like, well, there's certain mountain ranges that we're interested in. We're both on the East Coast, so it's probably East Coast. It's something, yeah, we're a few states away from each other. So maybe we agree that it's Virginia, the Virginia mountains. And so we start narrowing down kind of like where it's going to be. And then what are we thinking? Like, how much are we going to invest? Like, well, why don't we we could probably get a nice mountain house for $1 million. Okay, cool. So there's 2 of us. Are we each splitting at 500? Like, it'd be nice to get it down to 250 or something. And so, okay. So let's get 2 more co-owners. And so that group seeking co-owners, there's not a house yet. This is just an idea. And if you want to, you can go to our marketplace. Yep. There you go. And there's examples. So that upper left-hand one that you're looking at right there with the people jumping, that's a group of people. Go ahead and click that for me. That's a group of people who did not know each other before Plum. And the organizer kind of posted this ad out in our marketplace. By the way, all these people are Plum certified, which means that they've done background checks. They've done 740 or better soft credit pulls. So it's a FICO score, very good or excellent. And they've done a validation of liquid assets. They've shown us a bank account statement showing us that they're liquid at doing this. And so they've written all about it. If you click on that meet the organizer right there, drop that guy down. Or about the organizer. Yeah, that right there. Just click on that for me. And so you can see, like, you can just go click out there and you can find them on LinkedIn. You can see who these people are. And the idea here is you're just humanizing, like, you know, like, hey, there's some people and they're doing a thing, and would you like to talk to them? So if you're like, contact the organizer or learn more, then you'll come through our system. If you're Plum certified, we'll just go ahead and make the introduction. If not, we'll share with you how Plum works. And if you want to get Plum certified so you can talk to the folks, you spend $50 once, you get Plum certified. We make sure you're safe to talk. The beauty of Plum certified is that everybody in the community is trustworthy because they've been through this process, right? And that makes it easy to start forming up groups. Now, all that stuff said, the platform also works in the other direction. So if you click that word marketplace up top, Plum Marketplace, the left-hand side, and just click on, yeah, you go, click right there and scroll down just a little bit. That third one in that says Pine Knoll Shores. So go ahead and click that for me. So this is Holly, and Holly owns this amazing house in Pine Knoll Shores, which is in North Carolina. And she wants to be able, she has emotional family reasons to want to kind of still use the properties, but she just doesn't need it all year long. And so she wants to sell 75% of the interest in it and still keep 25%. And so this is an example of where there is a property involved already, and she's looking to sell shares. So we do it the same way. We get the group Plum certified. We run them through our preferences alignment to make sure everybody's lined up on all the questions. Are we renting this thing? Guns or no guns, dogs or no dogs, smoking or no smoking. What's the underage guest policy? We run this whole battery of things in a matter of 3 to 5 minutes for each person, and we make sure that everyone's lined up. And that way, everybody, you're precluding, you're obviating all the conflict that happens in groups because you're self-selecting people in and out. So if we're lined up, it's like, okay, well, that sounds great. I feel really interested in this. And then we broker a conversation. So the people, the group members talk, they get a sense of each other. They kind of talk about budget. And then at the end of it, you just get a thumbs up or thumbs down, which is, it's a little bit of like not exactly like swipe right, swipe left, but it's, it's that, right? It's like you're kind of choosing like, I would want to take another step. So once they're formed up, we drop them into an LLC. We create the LLC, and then that group goes and buys a house. In Holly's instance, she'll be a part of the LLC that turns around and buys the property from her as an individual, and she'll now own 25% of the interest in that LLC. In the case of the first group, they're 4 couples. They've formed that group. They're an LLC. We've introduced them to a Plum certified agent who already knows that area of the beach, and the agent's taking them out shopping. And we have technology that does the voting of the houses and the kind of thing. So it makes it really easy for everybody to engage.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's extremely, extremely interesting. And I would imagine that as people learn about it, you're going to wind up with more. I'm sure the realtors will get involved and start wanting to post their available properties on it.
They are.
So yeah, I think it's
happening. That's exactly what's happening. In fact, agents are paying us, which is fascinating. So we're now getting paid by both sides of the marketplace, which is good evidence early, right? I mean, we're not $1 billion Airbnb yet, but we're getting early evidence that people on both sides of the equation will get out their credit card and start working with us. And so that's an important early validation point.
Yeah, I think that's
I'll maybe just say right here, like one of the things that's different about my first business to this business is that the first business, it was a predictive marketing platform. And so you go to a party and people are like, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I do this predictive marketing platform. You can just watch their eyes roll back in their head, like, oh God, get me out of this conversation. And, what's different about this idea is that people get really excited about vacation, right? Like our most important memories with the people that we are closest to in life happen in the houses that we are helping people buy. Like this is important. And so that's a fun part of this. Like on a weekly basis, we hear somebody go, I love that you're tackling this. I love what you're doing. Like the word love happens a lot. And I'm a big softie. So, so it makes me feel good. But on the other end of it, there are people that will have a visceral reaction. Like, oh my God, I would never buy a house with somebody.
Oh yeah.
And to be honest, like the fact that I get this like very dichotomous, I would love versus I would hate, like the fact that those things happen is telling me that I'm on something really, really big, right? Like if your idea is just kind of like people are like, oh, all right, well, that's interesting. Maybe you're not really onto something. But if you get somebody if you get an idea where people routinely are like, I love it or I hate it, you're probably onto something that's really, really disruptive. And Brian Chesky, who's the founder of Airbnb, says that in several podcasts. Like, man, people either love the Airbnb idea or they hated it. And what he learned was he was doing something very disruptive. And thank God he changed the way the economy worked.
Yeah, I think that also it sort of helps to weed people out, because if you really hate the idea, of doing it, then you're probably not going to get involved, and that's okay, because you probably shouldn't be involved with having co-ownership with somebody else,
That's
because
so
maybe you can't get along.
that's so true. Yeah, like if it's not for you, thank God. Like get out.
Yeah.
Good, good. That's great. Go spend money with Airbnb. They're doing great. You know.
But
Uh,
it's true. So many people that just, I'm thinking about my friend group, and I'm thinking about my neighbors, and just in discussions, everybody goes on vacation. Everybody goes to the beach or the lake, and they all want to own their own house. Maybe they have family that they use houses with, but they all say the same thing. Oh, I'd love to have my own beach house, or I'd love to have this. And if you could find a way to do it with, which you're presenting, a way to do it with people that you can get along with, and do it in a structured way where there's not going to be any arguments over who does what.
that's right.
Because one of the big hangups that my wife and I have had is, would it be a waste because we're not going to be there? We'll feel forced to use it, and
Yes,
we only really want to use it a few times,
that's right.
and then we'd have to rent it out, and then it becomes a big hassle, and do we really want to take that on? But if we were doing it with other people, then they would pick up that slack. They would be
Right.
using it the times we're not. So it,
That's
it
right.
makes more sense.
Yeah, it's a much more efficient way to do it. It's a modern way. Like you think about the sharing economy being modern. It's that whole sharing economy is predicated on the concept of underutilized assets, right? I buy something and it sits empty most of the time. And so what this does is creates a mechanism where you're actually utilizing the asset more. And for a lot of assets, using it more actually makes it a healthier thing, right? Like if you buy a beach house and you let it sit empty most of the time, the critters are going to run through it.
Oh,
Leak in
sure.
the window is going to happen, and no one's going to capture it for 4 months until you get back, and it's a real problem. If you've got people routinely coming through the property, like those little things get captured early. And what's that saying? A ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? I mean, like if you catch it early because you're actually using the property and people are kind of keeping it up and that kind of thing, that goes really, really well.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think it's I think it's an innovation. I'm really happy you came on and shared it with us. I think it's great. We're running out of time. If there's, just in closing, if there's something that you would like to share with any entrepreneur, you've had all these experiences, and
Yeah.
some of them we've talked about, and the things to be prepared for. But if there's something you want to share with entrepreneurs about doing startups and what they can expect and what to think about, now would be a great time to talk about that.
Yeah. My biggest thing to entrepreneurs is just jump. Like it's going to be okay. Like go do it and it'll be the wildest like 3 to 6 months of your life. And statistically, if you probably won't make it and you'll go back and get another job, and that's fine. You'll go in with way more perspective. If you do make it, then you're on for creating something that no one's been able to figure out, and you will take a ton of pride in being the person that did what other people couldn't do, and that's cool and valuable.
Yeah, I really love, and I wrote it down because while you were talking, because again, the thought process that you laid out about, I sat down and went to a co-working space. I sat down and I started to have 3 or 4 ideas, and then I started looking into them all, and that whole process, I think, is extremely valuable to anybody listening on this show, because it really lays out how to logically think through the problem, because it's really problem solution. All entrepreneurial efforts are problem solution. Either the problem's big enough or the problem's not. Sometimes we create problems, we think they're problems that we're trying to solve, but they don't really exist. But this one is, I think it's cool, and I think you're really onto something big.
Thank you. Well, it's a $3 trillion asset. I'm working to bring 70 million more people to it. So we'll see. We're going big.
Yeah. All right. Hey, I appreciate it. We're out of a little time. I have a couple of closing things to take care of. But Matt, again, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this with us. I think we're going to look back on this show in a couple of years and say, see, this
Yeah,
is what he was talking about.
that's
So
right. Well, Phil,
yeah.
thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. So have a good week for the rest of your week, and thanks again.
Thank you, Phil.
All right. So yeah, fantastic. I think one of the best shows we've had, right? Talking about, not just talking about this innovative idea, but the way that Matt laid it out, just this whole thought process, which I think is extremely valuable for any entrepreneur to hear how he thought about it. But also, he's 100% right. Sometimes you just have to jump, and we've heard it a number of times from people that we mentor at some of the startup events, guys that have been thinking about doing a startup. They've had ideas for years, but what's holding them back is that they're afraid to make that jump. And Matt's right. Fear can be a motivator or it could be a demotivator. For me, I find fear to be a motivator. I've when things happen and I'm afraid that things are going downhill, I seem to work harder and faster to solve those problems. But I think it's a great lesson for a lot of entrepreneurs, and again, is the whole thought process. So just one last thought or one last piece to talk about. Again, remember, scan this QR code. It'll take you to my website, my personal website, and I've got a little startup planning guide. I think I'm going to revise it based on what Matt's talked about today to do a piece on fear. But again, it's free. It's not going to cost you anything. Just download it, and it'll help you think about it. Because I think a lot of times you go to these websites or you go to these process manuals and things about how to think through logically about how to do your startup. I think they're confusing. So I laid this out based on my experience and some of my friends' experiences doing startups to make it simple on how to think through and what the important parts to think through are. You don't have to think through every single thing. You're never going to build the perfect startup day one. It's an evolution, but you've got to start somewhere and understanding certain pieces. So it's out there. Scan that QR code. You'll get it for free, and I think you'll like it. And you can use it. It's a PDF. You can fill it out on your iPad, on your phone, even. So it's a great little tool. And given that, thanks for joining in. We've got some great stuff coming up. We've got a great guy next week. Who's really into, you want to hear a motivating startup guy. Next week is the guy. He loves to motivate people. He loves to help people. He's a good mentor, but he's also a veteran startup guy. So along the same vein as Matt, except more focused on, just that motivation technique. So thanks for joining us tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Are you a change agent? You're going to love the Superpowers for Good show. I'm Devin Thorpe. Every Tuesday and Thursday morning at 11 Eastern, I host an inspiring changemaker on Achieve TV. Join us right here on E360 TV.